Welcome back to Fishing for Real People. Today I want to talk about probably the oldest bait on the planet, and that is worms. Okay, so we're going to talk about some of the gear and techniques that I use when pan fishing. Let's start out with hooks. Today, instead of a real worm, I will be using this Green Pumpkin Finesse Shad by Z-Man, simply because I don't feel like torturing a worm or five while doing these demonstrations. So let's first talk about the hooks, and then I will talk about how to rig the different hooks. So hooks that I've probably found most useful will be the mosquito hook. This particular one is an owner in a size 2. And then we also have the octopus hooks. This one is a laser sharp in a size 4. I have them here. I'll hold them up side by side so you can see the difference. They're subtly different, but very similar. You can tell that the mosquito hook has a slightly larger opening, and the octopus, if I hold it at just the right angle here, you can see that it's kind of got a funky little bend to it, whereas the mosquito hook is a little bit more straight. Still has a little bit of a bend to it, but for the most part, they're much straighter than mosquito hooks are. So let's go over how to rig. Oh, I gotta show you this other one I almost forgot about here. The other type of hook that you're going to use will be called a bait keeper hook. They come in a lot of different sizes, but this will be a bait keeper hook. You can't see it on this one, so I will use this one as an example. And you can see up here where it's got these little barbs on it right up there. Let me get it on my hand there. Those barbs are on there, and they are designed to keep the bait from sliding down the shank of the hook. So let's go over a couple of different ways to hook. So one way that I use that I have found really effective is I will take and hook my worm. Now this works for if you're using earthworms or night crawlers, whatever size worm you're using. So I'll take and hook it right through the middle like that, pull it up past the eye of the hook, flip my hook around, and then go back through the body again on it. And what that allows for is a little bit of worm to be twitching around on top of the hook and worm to be twitching around on the bottom of the hook. And it's not going to get away because there's a barb here at the bottom of your hook that'll keep it from sliding off, or should. And then this part with the fat part of the hook will keep the worm from coming down any further. You may have it go sliding up the line, but that's rare that happens. Another way that I like to hook, and a lot of people do it this way, is you just hook it right through the body. I'm going to go to the thicker part here. You hook it right through the body, turn it around, hook it through the body again, just like that. You can cast it out that way. Gives you the same kind of effect. Another way to do it is to go through one end of the worm and go down through the nose, come out somewhere in the body. Oh, come on now. Come out somewhere in the body. Pull this up a ways so that the end of your hook is in the body of the worm. And then hook it back through again. And now you have essentially the hook end buried in the body of the worm and another one out like that. This is probably one of the ways that I use most to hook a worm. It gives you a lot of motion out at the end. the worm is going to be moving on its own, plus it'll get caught in any current. That's probably the way I use most often to hook a worm. So I'm just going to actually leave that hooked up, and we're going to talk about this technique that I use here that I find very effective when I'm going for perch. The testament to how durable Z-Man products are as I poke and repoke and unhook, and boy, this just does not want to get in there. There we go. So Z-Man products, great, stretchy, durable, taking abuse as demonstrated here. Anyway, so what I'll do is I'll take one of mosquito hook, bait keeper hook, whatever. I will tie a length of, for this particular application, I use monofilament. If you remember from a previous video, monofilament lines float. So reason for why I use monofilament in this case is because I want this to be as weightless and natural looking as possible. So like I said, for this application, monofilament. So I'll tie a leader onto the end of the hook and the other end onto a snap swivel. And then I will tie my main line onto a weight, a little sinker like this. I do not recommend going any more than 1/8 of an ounce for this particular technique. I just find that if you go more than that and the fish have like a really soft bite, you're going to miss it. So you don't want too much weight on there. And also, if there's too much weight on there and the fish bite it and they try and swim with it, they may realize, oh wait, something's wrong, and then they'll spit the bait out and take off and you just missed a fish. So I'll tie my main line on to a light sinker like this, and then I'll go ahead and hook this on to the sinker, and then I'll cast it out just like this with the weight tied to my main line and the snap swivel, which isn't snapping, there we go, the snap swivel on with my leader and the worm on the end. Now what this allows us to do is for that worm to kind of move freely down at the end. It's not weightless, but fairly weightless, and a lot of, perch or other fish that may be feeding close to the bottom will pick that up pretty readily. And when they do pick it up, because that weight is so light, you'll feel it, and then you can go ahead, set your hook, and take it, reel the fish in. The other reason for why I like using this snap swivel on the end to a sinker like that is because if you find that, a short leader isn't working, you can switch it up to a longer leader. I generally will have a leader or leader lengths in the range from 12 inches to 20 inches. And if you find that they're not biting on 12, try stepping it up to maybe a 16 and cast that out and see if that works. The other thing that I like to do is if you have a slip bobber set up, you can set your slip bobber up, or even if you're using a regular bobber and you want to maybe use this technique and drop it out, and then if you're fairly shallow, you need a slip bobber if you're fishing deeper, but if you're fishing kind of shallow, you could, just use your main line, put a hook on the end of your main line with one worm, and then hook your bobber up onto your main line. And then once your bobber is on your main line, you can hook this right on top of your main line so that your main line will be going through the snap swivel, through your bobber, down to a hook at the bottom. Oops, sorry about that. Down to your worm. And then you'd have your leader with another worm dangling out over the top. So you could be fishing two different depths then. One depth you could have set at maybe 3 feet, and then you've got this one just dangling around at maybe 1 foot or even 10 inches just around the bottom of the bobber. Or like I said, you use a slip bobber and then you can cast it out, and then the slip bobber will go to wherever the stop is, and this will slide up and down the line on top of your slip bobber, it'll slide up and down the line on top of your slip bobber, and you're good to go. Another way to do it is really just to use the bobber hooked onto your main line, and then that'll bounce in the waves a little bit if there are any waves or any current or ripples or anything that'll bounce in the waves. Then you have your main line hook tied to your hook and your worm down at the bottom, which will then, as that bobber imparts action, will bounce up and down in the waves, causing, you know, a little bit of motion and whatnot. A lot of bluegill have been caught with just a bobber, a hook, and a worm. Really simple to do it that way. Finally, probably the last way to fish this is literally just to cast it out and slow retrieve it. So as you would cast it out, you just slow retrieve and kind of bounce it back, you know, tap your finger on the end of the rod as you're retrieving, and that vibration will go all the way down the line, and you wind up with a little bit of motion down as you're slow retrieving it, and that'll cause fish to go nuts too. So there really isn't a wrong way to fish a worm. Fish have been eating worms since the dawn of time, and they will continue to eat worms until the end of time. As long as you're not using too small of a hook or too big of a hook, you'll be just fine taking a chunk of worm, tossing it out there, and trying to catch a fish. So the big thing to pay attention to is where they're biting, or where in the water column they're biting. If you're fishing in slightly deeper water, say 20 feet of water, you may notice that, you know, experiment with the depth that you keep the worm at. You may notice that they bite in 15 feet, they might bite in 10 feet. There's one lake that I fish where the fish hang out at, they like a 20-foot, well, 18 to 20-foot water depth, and they bite in the top 3 feet of the water column. There's another lake that I fish where the water depth is about 15 feet, pretty much across the whole center part of the lake, and they bite right near the bottom. I can't get anything to bite on the surface in that lake, but you dangle something right off the bottom and the fish will bite. So learn your lake, learn where they're biting, and toss a worm. Almost guaranteed you're going to be able to catch something. So thanks for watching this video. Hope you found it helpful, and we'll catch you on the next one.